When Diddy got arrested by the Department of Homeland Security after a flood of progressively worse and worse lawsuits and accusations for almost a year straight, no one was surprised. If Diddy had ever been one thing, it was creepy. You didn't have to look very hard or even look at all to see that something was wrong in Diddy's mind. Inappropriate relationships with teenage Justin Bieber and Usher, the rumors around the mysterious deaths of Biggie and Tupac, an easily recognizable thirst for attention, and even worse. Basically, people had already known for years that Diddy wasn't the generous, conscientious music executive that he and his team tried so hard to make him look like. Behind the big donations to schools, the activism, there was always an undertone of evil that even a billion-dollar fortune couldn't cover up.
Savage! I'm a savage! Oh! I'm a savage! Whatever I want, I'm going to get!
You don't get your name associated with murder and stealing for no reason, but it wasn't until his arrest and the ripping off of the mask that Diddy's true nature was finally revealed. He wasn't a good guy with a dark side or a nuanced figure with a complex past. At the exact moment when the federal government brought him in for sex trafficking charges, it was confirmed that Diddy was truly deeply evil. The evidence was right there. It was the final piece of the puzzle, revealing that Diddy had spent his entire life taking advantage of others to the point where his music empire was nothing but a front for his sick obsessions. At the same time, though, Diddy's arrest somehow created a lot more questions than it answered. We all knew he was a bad guy, don't get me wrong, but now we're realizing that it went so much deeper with Diddy, starting to look like his sick, disturbing crimes might rival those of Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein. Not just one bad actor, but instead the leader of a criminal operation carrying out revolting abuse and exploitation. And so now there are even more questions than there were before.
I'm just a passionate young man, and I made a mistake.
Well, everybody's going to get in trouble. It's a question of how do you get out of trouble.
How did he get away with it for so long? What was the full extent of his crimes? But even more sinister, who knew about his empire of abuse and didn't tell? Who out of his massive network of celebrity friends and powerful contacts was joining in? The size and scope of Diddy's alleged crimes combined with his control over the industry implies a much larger web of deception and evil than most of us could have ever imagined before. Not monsters in the shadows, but instead evil, despicable people standing in the spotlight. But most of all, how is a person like this created? Who is Diddy, and how did he end up as one of the most evil public figures in modern history?
My father was a hustler. He was a drug dealer, he was a hustler.
If I'm acting crazy, that's Diddy. You know what I'm saying? If I'm like dancing real smooth.
On December 28, 1991, Diddy and Uptown Records artist Heavy D, at the time one of the top rappers in New York, were set to co-host a charity basketball game in the City College of New York Gymnasium, a small venue with a capacity for about 2,700 people.
A few times I thought I was going to pass out because it was hot on that staircase. You know what I'm saying? And when they closed the doors, I knew something was going down.
I was there, I was on the floor, I watched people.
As a crowd gathered in the lobby, some people rushed down the stairs and through a set of swinging doors, thinking they would be able to get into the event that way, not realizing that the stairs didn't lead to the main event, but instead a utility stairwell.
City College was a deep experience for me. I was there, I was on the floor, I watched people take their last breath, regurgitate, and die.
Over 3,000 people rushed forward without a clue, creating a crowd crush that would blow 9 people at the front of the crowd in under 15 minutes. The 9 people by the City College Stampede were high school and college students, all between the ages of 15 and 26.
We were there at the doorway pulling people in, trying to get them.
They were all from the surrounding neighborhoods. And while crowd crush events can be impossible to predict and control, and most of the time the fault lies with the security team, Diddy's reputation still took a hit with many media outlets directly blaming him for the death of almost 10 kids. After all, the event had his name on it.
All right. What happened was that Puff first hired 18 of my guys to do the job for outside. I see that the people was already crowded out there and it was crazy. So I finagled my way in there. I said, I told Puff right then and there, I say, Puff, if they don't do a boxing one outside and get these kids off the door, somebody gonna die tonight.
Diddy even later claimed that he contemplated taking his own life after the accident, saying that he lost his mind from the pain and trauma. He stated publicly that he had been left alone in the gym with all the bodies trying to resuscitate people to no avail.
I knew I would have to explain what was going on and what happened. I was there with 9 bodies on the ground. Nobody else was there. No police, nobody. Just me and 9
He
bodies.
said, Gene, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. You just handle the stars once they come inside.
In his words, it ruined his life.
It was too much for me to handle. After the incident, it was like I was crazy, losing my mind, thinking about the people who died, thinking about the families, thinking about their pain. For a while, I was probably clinically insane.
It was bananas. I pulled friends through the door. You know, first time in my life, I gave mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to people.
In reality, though, the other side of the story didn't quite go the same way. The real victims were the people who lost their kids, brothers, sisters, and friends, and those who later spoke out all pointed out that their own personal lives were over forever. They had no fame, wealth, or clout waiting for them on the other side, just the trauma of losing family members they could never replace. One person whose older brother was at the event said this in 2024.
I believe in karma. He never really owned up to anything, and he never told us he was sorry. Whatever's going on with him now, I guess it was meant to be. But me, I lost everything that day. I lost my big brother, my best friend. He walked right past me after there was this big rush into the gym. He was with Devontae Adams from Jodeci, and he didn't seem concerned about what was going on. I never got the sense of remorse or accountability. Just, let me get my stuff and get out.
But somehow this story doesn't just end with callous indifference to people's lives. The concert had originally been organized as an AIDS outreach education event, and a portion of the ticket sales was to be donated to charity.
To know that young people attending a rap concert who have paid as much as $20 a ticket.
Once all the dust settled from the tragedy, though, the money was nowhere to be found, and there had possibly never been any money set aside to begin with. A criminal investigation later discovered that while the majority of the blame for the disaster should fall on City College for failing to realize the potential for a huge crowd, some blame still fell on Diddy himself, which resulted in several lawsuits settled out of court in the years to follow. But what most of all revealed Diddy's true character was a 1998 civil case that was brought against him by 2 of the victims' relatives.
We put him on suicide watch. I think that he was on suicide watch because he thought he lost everything.
During that case, a New York City judge named Louis Benza ruled that Diddy was lying about his attempts to save people in the gym, and it only questioned his credibility even further. After the events of the City College Stampede, Diddy seemed a lot more like a sociopathic narcissist than a guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time during a tragedy.
I finagled my way in there, me and Slicknam. I said, yo, I told Puff right then and there, I say, Puff, if they don't do a boxing one outside and get these kids off the door, somebody gonna die tonight. He said, Gene, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. You just handle the stars once they come inside.
Wasn't necessarily his fault that the accident had happened, but the way he acted afterwards, trying to take credit for things he didn't do, trying to paint himself as a victim when all he had done was separate himself from the real situation. At best, it made him look like a narcissistic scumbag, but at worst, it revealed an evil lurking underneath his charismatic personality. Because even in the early 90s, Diddy was already known for being a party animal unlike any other, but it wasn't just a vice, it was also one of his greatest assets. Once he was working at Uptown Records, he became notorious for parties that he called Daddy's House, attracting over 1,000 guests every week. From college students to local kids to celebrities, rappers, and athletes, he was becoming more than just an A&R, but instead a strangely alluring, larger-than-L life figure in the industry. Because these parties weren't just about having fun, they were strategic networking events where Diddy could spot new talent, make connections, and build his reputation. However, they also had a darker side with reports of excessive drug use, underage drinking, and questionable behavior even early on.